I'm Edward Warfield. I'm the publisher of Citybiz. I'm honored today to interview Nancy Kaplan, who's the co-founder and co-CEO of Conscient Strategies. Welcome, Nancy.
Thank you.
Can you tell us what is Conscient Strategies?
Yes, Conscient Strategies is a consulting firm, and we work with organizations going through what we call the constancy of change because change never stops. And we work in three major areas. We work with agile strategy, which is strategy that you can continue to evolve as change continues. Scaling, so how do we get bigger and how do we continue to grow? And leadership and culture. And those three areas really are very integrated and work together.
So, what was the genesis for the founding of Conscient Strategies, and how did you and your co-founder Hannah Ramick come together?
Most of us have worked in environments that we just did not enjoy. We thought the leadership was disconnected and out of touch. We thought behaviors were disrespectful. We didn't feel valued. We didn't feel engaged. We didn't belong. And not only is that unpleasant for the individual, that's also bad for the company or the organization because it really impacts their ability to meet their mission and their objectives. So Conscious Strategies was established to show organizations that there is a better way, and that's both for the organizations and for the individuals. Hannah and I met doing a turnaround for a company whose strategy was stalled, whose revenues were declining, and who hired absolutely terrific people who left within a year over and over and over again. So those were the issues we focused on. And we had a lot of success. We had a lot of fun. We stabilized the firm. We put in a new strategy that started to increase revenues. And after about a year and a half, we looked at each other and said, that was fun. Let's do it again. And that was the genesis of Conscient Strategies. Hannah is a certified executive coach and an MBA, and she's an expert in performance management and productivity improvement. And I'm a certified mindfulness leadership teacher and practitioner, and I have a lot of experience in strategy development and implementation, in mergers and acquisitions, and in business transformations. So we're very different. We have very different personalities. We have very different skill sets, and we have very common visions and goals and want the same things. And I always look at us as sort of a yin and yang. We are each whole in and of ourselves, but when we come together, we create something new that's even stronger.
And so, what are some of the key milestones since launching Conscient Strategies?
We're 7 years old now. And I would say the first milestone was completing our first year in the black, which was excellent, good way to start. And our second milestone was passing the 5 year mark because only fewer than 50% of startups actually make it to 5 years. So those were big milestones. I think the second big milestone we looked at was taking the plunge and hiring our first employee after a couple of years. That's a little scary, and we know that 90% of women-owned businesses have 0 employees. So we took that plunge. That was a big milestone, and we're now a full-time staff of about 12 and continuing to grow. And I guess our third big milestone was reaching our first $1 million year. And again, just over 4% of women-owned businesses have revenues of $1 million. So we were pleased when we got there, and we didn't stop.
So, what is leadership and culture due diligence, and can it be quantified?
Yes, it can be, just for starters. Let me start by saying that over 70% of transactions, such as mergers and acquisitions or PE funding, do not achieve their goals, their stated goals. They don't necessarily fail, but they don't do what they said they were going to do. And in most instances, we find that the financial due diligence and the market assessments and the strategies that were put together were really excellent. They were very solid. And yet, very little is done to effectively assess the leadership and the culture of those organizations to determine whether they can achieve the new objectives that come along with the transactions. So leadership and culture due diligence says, let's take that leadership and culture assessment and look at it during the due diligence phase, rather than waiting until after the transaction, when we do a lot of post-merger integration, and we're trying to fix things. Let's put together a diligence process, which is proprietary for something we put together, to decide how is this going to work? What are the things that you need to do? And let's increase the likelihood of success of the transaction by doing it earlier and knowing how we're going to mitigate the risks that we find.
And can you explain the proprietary processes that Conscient Strategies uses?
To a point. They are proprietary. But the proprietary assessments are customized for the strategic objectives of each particular deal, for starters. And we do that because the specific leadership and culture characteristics that are going to align with a rapid growth objective are really different from those that are going to best support a transaction focused on consolidating a market or alternatively driving innovation or whatever the particular objective is. So we've identified very definitive and specific characteristics that best support different types of objectives. So that's where we start, is understanding what you're trying to do. Then we go in and we collect both qualitative and quantitative data through interviews, through surveys, through observation, and through research. We do a lot of lurking. We watch how people interact with each other. We listen to what they say. We look at what's been written. And I think it's important to look at the qualitative data. Most people understand the quantitative surveys and you're pulling together what's written down. But the qualitative information does two things. Number one, it provides the context and story for what we're looking at. Hannah always likes to say numbers are just numbers until you have a story around them, and then they tell you something. So we look at that story, and then we also have some proprietary rubrics that we've developed that enable us to put numbers against the qualitative factors that we've identified, so that we don't have to just tell stories. We can say, this is the impact of that information. When we look at leadership, we address strengths and areas for growth and risks. And the goal is really to understand how prepared is the existing leadership to accomplish new strategic objectives. Because you can have a leader who is fantastic at running the business as it is today, but if you want them to double growth, they don't have the right factors and characteristics to do that. Not bad leaders, just wrong leaders for the new situation. When we look at culture or cultures, in plural if it's going to be a merger, then we create an existing baseline for the two cultures or the single culture. We identify what the ideal culture should be, and then we look at what are the gaps and risks in achieving those. In both the leadership and the culture assessments, we get pretty specific. These are not big, hey, is he or she a good leader? It's very specific. What are the characteristics we're looking at? How do you define this culture? What are the factors that we're looking for? And we are then able to link the leadership and culture to the return on investment and quantify the potential cost of the leadership and culture risks. So we can come back and say to you, given the leadership now and the culture as it is, you've got a 45 or 55% chance of achieving your objectives. And here are the pieces that you have to go into and try to fix or mitigate as you go forward to improve that likelihood. So we also come up with those mitigation factors.
And so what impact does organizational culture have on a successful merger integration?
Well, let's start by defining the fact that culture is the unspoken rules about how people interact and behave. And culture underlies everything within an organization. It's both springs from and drives things like values and priorities, decision making, your strategies, your processes, how you work. It's like a family. Every family has its own culture. Every family interacts a little bit differently. And whether it's been articulated or not, it tells you how to behave. So when two organizations merge, processes change, success measures change, people's roles change, social networks and friendships at work get disrupted, and there's a turnover in staff. And there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of fear. And the problem is that if those things are left to work themselves out, the length of time required to do so is really significant. Often it will take years. And I think there's a now standard business school case on the HP Compaq merger, which actually was a great merger in retrospect, but it took about 7 years before they started to see anything good come out of it because of those clashes of leadership and culture. So the two biggest issues that we see are employee turnover and decreased productivity when the cultures and leadership don't mesh well.
And so how does Conscient Strategies mitigate or de-risk due to leadership and culture prior to finalizing a deal?
Well, we de-risk it, first of all, by identifying what those factors are and looking at the mitigation opportunities. So the mitigation opportunities can really differ. They can be anything from executive coaching to replacing individuals to redefining the leadership team members to restructuring or clarifying expectations. The issues really depend on the specific issues that we uncover. So usually what we will do is include mitigation plans into the 100-day plan that the transaction usually creates. And then we will work with our clients in post-transaction times to execute those plans. We had a really interesting client at one point who did an add-on acquisition and did not do the culture and leadership assessment beforehand. They acquired a very high energy, sort of brash, what I call madman culture type of organization, because they wanted to expand their regional success. It was a national organization. The problem was that this organization is a bit low key, and they're very kind and they're very respectful of each other. And the acquisition brought in a lot of business and a lot of stress. And they had a huge employee turnover as a result. And because it was a professional services group, the employees were bad-mouthing the organization that they left. So it became very difficult for the organization to hire new people that they wanted to bring in. And then you found that the national leadership team also had to direct a lot of its time to sort of calming waters and figuring out what's going on and reassessing. So they just lost a lot of the value of the acquisition that they had. Having identified that beforehand, they could have avoided that.
And so, what are the growth plans for Conscient Strategies?
Well, we want to continue to be high growth. We think that's fun, and we want to do it through consistent, excellent delivery. We focus on our matrix of the verticals that we really are interested in working in, the legal space, PE firms, healthcare, disruptors, and startups. So we look at those, and then on the other vertical, on the other horizontal, we look at the functional areas of our expertise. So leadership and culture, due diligence, scaling, agile strategy. And it's in those intersections that we want to continue to grow. We'd like to have 20 employees pretty soon. We've got 12 now, so we'd like to continue to grow there. And I think the last thing we want to do from a growth standpoint is, to date, 100% of our business has come from referrals. And on the one hand, we're extremely proud of that. And on the other hand, we'd like to go beyond that so that we can grow a little bit faster, just be known for the excellence we do, and maybe have people pick up the phone and call us.
So, are there any parts of the Conscient Strategies story that we haven't told, that you haven't told?
I mean, nothing really critical. I think that when you're starting an entrepreneurial business and you're going on your own, two of the big issues, if you're going to do it in a partnership is like a marriage. And, you have your ups and your downs, and especially when you're different. And there's huge strength in that. And there's also the matter of you have to figure out how you're going to get along when you disagree. And it either strengthens or it weakens pretty quickly, I think would be the first issue that I would look at. I think the second one is, we decided that we wanted to be a company that we wanted to work for. And so having long careers behind us, there were a lot of things that just didn't work well, things that were uncomfortable. I was always the first and only woman partner in a lot of firms, and that puts a lot of pressure on. And so we kind of looked at each other and said, let's create an organization where we want to work and where we would have wanted to work when we were younger as well. And so we're a little bit of an experiment on our own of, can we really create what we said we wanted to create, and is the kind of company that we think can operate effectively and successfully, continue to grow and be successful. So we're our own little petri dish in a way.
Well, Nancy, thank you for sharing your story, and we wish you the best of luck as you move forward in your career and with Conscient Strategies. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to talk to you.